Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Return to the Realm, a rereaders podcast for the Realm of the Elderlings series by Robin Hobb. I'm Kayiu, here with Alex and Leah, and we're starting Assassin's Quest today. I cannot believe that we're already on the third book. Feels like we're on a crazy pace. So I remember this being my least favorite of the original Farseer trilogy, but it's still really good. It's very long, lots of stuff happens, and I think in hindsight it can feel frustrating because it's like, well, okay, he did this thing and then it went nowhere, but then the more I'm rereading it, I'm feeling actually like there's lots of stuff where it's like a bunch of stuff happens and it's not really like plot relevant, but it's very relevant for Fitz as a character, and so even like 5 chapters, and I'm beginning to really appreciate that. What are your all of your thoughts on this book?
For me, every time I read this trilogy, a different book is my favorite. Like the first time, this one was, and then the second time, Assassin's Apprentice one was, and then this time I feel like Royal Assassin was. So ultimately, I think I probably just like them all the same.
I love all my children equally. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Okay. I literally don't remember anything that happens in this book, you guys. I know about like Verity and like Kettle, but everything in between, I'm like, no, I have no recollection. So like I'm going in basically as a fresh reader. I'm excited.
Honestly, the best way to experience it. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Except I'm really depressed because the first couple chapters are so freaking sad. And I needed something a little, like, she needed to throw me a tiny little bit of a bone to make it happy so that I want to keep reading. Right now, I just want to cry in my bedroom.
That's her fault. No, like, not her fault. That's like a common thing. Like, I feel like the start of Assassin's Apprentice when Fitz like being super emo and stuff, like,
Yeah.
sometimes the book needs just a little bit more levity.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, this one really picks up right where the last one left off.
Yeah. Ugh. But if you guys haven't seen one of our recent Instagram posts, my copy, it has a debossed little signature of Robin Hobb, and I'd never seen that before.
Oh, nice.
How magical is that?
How do you read it?
I thought it was the same as mine. I thought it was just a paper.
It was the little specialness that I needed to keep me going. It was a little, like, it was a blessing from her. Like, I promise it'll get better, even though we know she's lying.
Mm-hmm.
It'll get better by the end of Tawny Man.
And then it gets better by the end of Fitz and the Fool.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, speaking of Tawny Man and Fitz and the Fool, if you're just finding us for the first time because you finished Assassin's Quest, be warned, this is a spoilers all podcast. We're going to talk about any and all of the 16 books in Realm of the Elderlings. So,
and if you thought that there were 12, you're wrong. There's more.
But yeah, do you want to just get into it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I suppose we have to, right?
So we've got a little prologue here, The Unremembered, and very big vibes of the start of Assassin's Apprentice. It's once again Fitz at his desk. We were usually narrator Fitz is sort of like hands-off approach, but we get these like interludes of like, yeah, I'm old and I'm writing and I'm in my cabin. And so it's sort of like a catch-up for those who've like forgotten since the last books of just him ruminating on all the events that happened at the end of the last one.
I feel like chapter 3 or 4 actually felt more like summary from the last books than this chapter did. And I wonder if I was just like picking out special things from this one and that's why. But I feel like a different one was more like reminders of what happened.
There was like a weird I remember I think it was like chapter 3 or 4 where I think it's 3 because it's before he sets off. He's like, all of this stuff happened, and I'm like, didn't you explain this earlier, or like haven't we already gone over this?
I wanted to like skim through because I'm like, I know all that stuff that happens, but I was like also so paranoid that she would put something special in that I would miss and like not have a note for. So I read the whole thing and I'm like, well, okay, Fitz, like, can we just move on?
I've
I mean, this
noticed
entire
that
podcast is we already know what's happened, but we're gonna look for the special things. So,
Yeah.
I've noticed that she does that a lot in her books. Like, she'll take a lot of time in the beginning to like reiterate what happened in the last book.
Yeah.
And like it's such a hard line to walk because it can be boring, but at the same time, like if I hadn't read Royal Assassin in like a while, it would be nice
It's
reading
boring.
this one to have like little reminders.
Yeah.
So, but it's so obviously like for the reader that it kind of stands out when we're reading them back to back.
It really does because the way Fitz's inner monologue is, he's kind of in a wolf like that where like he doesn't
ruminate.
think, about any of that stuff unless it's like something that was triggered by something that he saw or something that someone said or like he saw the person, so now he's thinking about them.
Right.
It is such a stark difference from like the Fitz that we kind of know.
I thought it was funny in the prologue when he said, though I no longer possess the body of a young and healthy man, because we know just from our previous reading that at this point he's probably in his like late 20s or early 30s. Like, okay, Fitz. You
yeah, and
literally
then I love like later on he's like Chade was even older. He was an old man. He was worn by the weather. I had no heart to tell the old man. Meanwhile, Chade is like 40 and he will go on living for like another half a century.
And same with Burrich. Like he said that Burrich is like past his prime and he's like an old man now. And I'm like, but he's
like
not that old. And he also like can still snag Molly from you. So let's watch out, Fitz.
Okay.
Right.
But yeah, it's weird because like on one hand, I guess I could kind of understand it if the intent is like it's a medieval analog, and so people don't live that old. But then like, no,
And they
we've
all
seen
live to be
people
fucking
live.
ancient.
Yeah,
we've
so like
seen
it just
people
it
live a
doesn't
long
work.
time.
Also, like Fitz whining, well, crying about being like an old man now. He does the same thing in Royal Assassin at the very beginning of the book. Like he's like, I was in the body of an old man. Like I can't do anything. We
You're
just need to
14.
come back and be like,
within
bro.
like 6 months, he's like beating the shit out of Red Ship Raiders.
Yeah, the fuck. Fitz, you're still young. Quit thinking you're so old. I think he just wants to be an old man. He's like, I've got old man energy. Like I just should be an old man already.
I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe like even though he hates being an old man, it's kind of what he wanted because he wants to stop being everyone's boy. So
He wants
he's sort
to
of
be
like,
old.
you see, I'm physically feeble, and that makes me mature. Like,
And in the very last trilogy, he is older in like mentality and like physical age, but his body is like with the skill healing continues to keep him so young. And he like it's the reverse because when he's young, he feels like he's in an old person's body, and then when he is old and wants to be in that like creaky old body, he's like still young and chipper.
mhm. There's lots of quotes here in this first chapter where I was like, okay, Fitz. Like, Fitz is like, a man has to have purpose in life. I know this now, says man who has no purpose.
Yeah, literally his purpose is sitting in his little shack and raising Hap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of Hap, Fitz is like, I do not try to explain to him why I do as I do. It is not a secret one can give to a younger man. It is one he must earn and learn on his own. Which, yeah, that pretty much describes all, like, the entire arc of what happens with Hap. But fortunately, he doesn't learn the same lessons as Fitz in terms of, like, coping mechanisms for pain or what. Like, the context is different for what they're talking here, but it is the same end result that happens.
And it's what Burrich and Chade finally realize that they need to do for Fitz. in this section when they leave him. They're like, he needs to learn on his own because we are the people who like want to help him and tell him what to do, and all he does is listen to us or go against our wishes, which is not listening, but it's still fine.
Mm-hmm. Man, it's just like it's crazy how much they just like weave into like even the first few chapters. Like you have parenthood, themes of identity, themes of responsibility, and like they're all like so closely linked, but they make a point. Hobb makes a point to like distinctly explore each of them, and it's like it's just wild to me because I feel like lots of fantasy series sort of are there for the narrative and the characters, and we don't get like themes as much. Like not all. Like there's like lots of good ones which do, but then I feel like sometimes like they're just like they're here for the plot, and I'm cool with that. But then like here I'm like the plot sometimes meanders or whatever, but like the characters and themes are so good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time with fantasy, it doesn't stray too far from the typical good versus evil or like friendship themes.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, like, I don't even know if you can boil it down as much to good versus evil because everything is so nuanced and everyone's intentions are like Regal is evil, but he's operating from a perspective of, I hate these people because they killed my mother, which
Yeah,
is
it
like,
feels like less like
he
it
doesn't
feels
think
like
he's
all of
evil.
like the big bad evil people. There are conflicts with them, but the conflicts with them feel sort of like a device to explore the characters and their development more so than the primary focus.
Right. Like even Kenneth. Kenneth is like the worst, but you feel horrible for him at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And I feel like in all of the books, there's not one single like person as the enemy. It's like there are a couple of people that we focus on as being like these horrible people who are causing a lot of conflict, but then there are like institutions and organizations and like a whole group of people that are causing problems as well. So it's like we've got multiple points of conflict. So it's not just a straightforward thing. It
Mm.
feels more like real life.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
I think the first trilogy with like the Red Ship Raiders and Regal is the least good at this because Regal is the mustache twirling villain and the Red Ships by virtue of being sort of like faceless. It's
Are the
like
evil henchmen.
yeah, we don't like get that much. But then as soon as we hit like live ships, like suddenly there's like a lot more nuance to like the antagonist or like evil forces. They
I always forget that like she wrote live ships right after this. It's still like because I always just like group all of the Fitz things together and then have like these interspersed in, but this was the like live ships was the next trilogy to be written and to come out. It wasn't even about Fitz, and it's just kind of wild how different it is.
mm-hmm.
And how it ties in. Like, I can't imagine having all of that in your head and knowing how to tie it together. Like, how does she switch gears like that and then, like, still be able to circle it back?
And also have the patience to like because at least I don't know, for me I read these over like the course of like a few years and it's like okay, cool.
Yeah.
But this is
Right.
literally decades in the making and it's like how like I would simply not
Right.
have the patience. I would just want to like I would want to like rush into it. I would definitely do a bad job because I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be so sick when they find out that, and then I would just like in the first book reveal it, and it's like, shit, wait, that's not impactful at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
would give up or I'd get tired. Like, she sticks with the same characters for so long. Like, I wrote one book and then I was like, I hate these characters now. I'm sick of them. Like, I wouldn't be able to write 16 books with like the same people.
I think that she went in not knowing the full story. So it was kind of like as she was writing, she learned it as well. And as she wrote each new trilogy, she like gained more like insight into the future things, but it wasn't like starting Assassin's Apprentice. I know exactly where this is going to go. I know all of the books it's going to be, and I know like all the characters and who's going to do what and all of this stuff for the end.
Which again
I
is
think
so
it
wild given how well they like connect with
They
each other.
meshed well so like it's amazing. It feels so organic and like oh
Well,
very
I
well.
think I remember her saying in like an interview or something that the characters just kind of take on their own life. So even if she like tries to plan something, it'll be like they'll just be like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
They'll like do their own thing, and she kind of just has to go with it. And it's like, I mean, I'm such a planner, I could never write that way. But I think it's so fascinating when people talk about their characters like
real
getting a
people
life of their own. Yeah, like being sentient almost.
making
I
decisions
feel like
that
I've said this
aren't
before,
what you
but I
would have.
straight up like there's no other book series where I feel this way, but it feels like Hobb actually just like went to another world and like just like on the sidelines was like, wow, this is crazy. Then came back and was like, I should write a book
Wrote it.
about this.
Yeah, I agree. Because the characters are so well developed that they feel, and that's why like I don't usually like to reread stuff, but these ones I can reread so many times because they're so well developed that I feel like I'm visiting friends or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're our friends. Like, I know Fitz almost as well as I know myself, or like better even, because we lie to ourselves, but like we can't lie. Fitz could try to lie to us, but we know him better than that.
Right.
And just being able to see them over the course of a whole lifetime.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the magical part. We grow up with Fitz, we see him through his worst times and through his best times, and then we like watch him grow old as well. Like, I love him. I'm always gonna love him.
So like to what you said about like not being able to write a single like a thing like more than one book with a set of characters, I think I would be the type to just be like, I'd be like, man, okay, I can't just leave it here. I want to know more of what happens, but I have to like make that.
I know more of what happens in my own head. Like I know exactly where everybody ends up and whatever, but I'm like I'm tired of writing them.
Fair.
So
hmm I think my last note for this prologue was Fitz says, "Those years are lost to me and all the years of their lives to come," which like when you first read it, you just think it's like metaphorical, but then like maybe I don't think even Fitz realizes this, but like he literally lost all of those years to Girl on a Dragon.
hmm.
Mhm. Which like I think that's one of the things which makes me appreciate rereading Assassin's Quest specifically a lot more, because I feel like this book is so heavy on like just like word choices or throwaway lines that become so much more significant later
Yeah.
in a way that I hadn't noticed. I think like I clocked a lot of it on my first rereads of Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin, but I never really liked Assassin's Quest that much, so I just assumed that I could like skim over it. And then on like a more intensive read, I'm like, oh no, there's depth here.
Yeah, this one's chock full of a lot of stuff, I think.
hmm Yeah. Do you guys have any other notes for the prologue?
Well, I'm mad at Burrich and Chade because why would they not tell Patience that Fitz is alive? Like,
I
that
know.
is her son, and they should not have done that to her. And that's so rude.
You know, Shade was like, it's to keep him safe. It's to keep Patience safe. The knowledge would be too much, and it's like,
I think
no.
they both very greatly underestimate Patience and the intelligence and the like everything about her they underestimate because they just boil her down to this eccentric like
Shade just
royal.
underestimates women. Let's be real. He's like, oh, Ketrican, she's. I can't imagine that she
Yeah,
would be. And
I
then
didn't think about that.
and then Patience, he's like, wow, I'm so surprised that she like has like rallied the guard to her, and it's like, dog.
I think Shade underestimates everybody. Like I think he thinks no one is as like capable as he is.
Oh
And then
yeah,
whenever
absolutely.
anyone is, he's like shocked by it.
Yeah.
hmm
Shade's got a very big ego
Yeah.
and it gets in the way of a lot of things. But I think that Burrich should have told her. Even if Shade was like, don't do it, but you know that
Burrich
Burrich
never
listens
would.
to authority. So if
Yeah.
Shade is his like figure of authority, he won't go against what he says, even though Like, patients deserve to know more than anybody else.
Yeah. And it's so sad that he, like, it breaks Burrich's heart too, because Patience thinks that he abandoned Fitz. And he,
Yeah.
like,
They don't talk for like 15 to 20
Burrich, I would
years,
hate him
right?
too. Huh?
I was just thinking, they don't talk for like 15 to 20 years after that because of this incident.
Yeah. They, like, never talk again because she thinks that Burrich just abandoned Fitz, which is so sad.
Yeah, like I never clocked that because we don't get like interaction with them in Tawny Man, so I just like forget these things. I'm so mad because I feel like there's so many like I feel like the time spent in Tawny Man is well spent, but also I wish we had more of it because I feel like lots of the characters from the original trilogy like don't get the space they deserve, or like we don't get the space to see how they've like come. When I say most of the characters, I just mean Patience because I feel like Patience gets shafted hard.
Yeah, I wish
Like,
that,
can we not have more scenes of like Fitz scurrying around the walls, just like spying on people so we can see how they're doing?
I felt like the reunions felt a little bit rushed for me at the end of Tawny Man, like when he goes back and he meets Patience and Lacey again, and like even when he reunites with Burrich, like granted they're busy when all of that's happening, but like when he goes back to Buckkeep and he runs into like Blade and he meets Patience and Lacey, like, and when he meets Nettle, even like I wanted more of those interactions, and I didn't, like, it was in the tail end where she's tying everything up in like 30 pages,
Yeah.
And like 29 of those pages are like him creepily stalking Molly.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I feel like, especially given the themes of Tawny Man, where it's like you can't like you have to become a human again. You can't stay rooted just in the present. You have like with lots of the stuff that they're talking about in these early chapters, where it's like a person is someone who is like tied to their past, and so like, but then it also feels like she just like glosses over the past completely, or like we don't get enough time to explore Fitz's connections to the past, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think that should be it for the prologue. So let's get into chapter 1, Grave Birth. So this chapter details the weeks and months that occur after Burrich and Chade bring Fitz back to life at the end of the last book. Fitz has essentially suffered some sort of like I guess you would call it a psychological break, but like it's more like he's still in the mindset of a wolf and uh, doesn't recognize his own identity and doesn't want to come back to being Fitz chivalry. So Burrich slowly coaxes him back to life as Fitz instead of life as a wolf. And so this whole chapter is like him coming back and remembering who he is. And once again, the Robin Hobb being the greatest of all time at writing alternate or warped perspectives. It's just I don't think I've seen any other, maybe N.K. Jemisin, but like
Yeah.
no, but
N.K.
like
Jemisin definitely comes close, but I think Hobb takes the cake for sure.
mhm.
Yeah, I think even though this chapter's like a big time bummer, it's one of my favorites just because the prose is so good. Like how Fitz is referring to him and Night Eyes always as we, and then like at one point it switches to I to like show that he's starting to come back to himself a little bit. Or he calls Burrich Heart of the Pack, and then he like catches a whiff of Molly's scent on his coat, and that's enough to like bring him back a little bit more. And then he starts calling him Burrich instead of always just Heart of the Pack. Like it's little tiny changes, and throughout the chapter, like those changes build up until we get like regular Fitz writing again. And but it's so nuanced that it's not like abrupt. You don't notice it. It's
Yeah, the sentences start out very short and like this is all you need to hear, and then they become a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer until we're like back with Fitz.
Yep.
And at one point in the beginning, it like is in present tense. Like I saw the switch, and I'm not sure if that's supposed to be, but it fits very well because it's Fitz saying like Night Eyes is as scared of Heart of the Pack as I am, or is more scared of Heart of the Pack than I am, or something like that, because Burrich is kind of taking Fitz and training him like an animal because like that's all that Fitz is right now.
Yeah, it was. I completely forgot that Burge was like because like Burge leaves Fitz alone and he's like, if you leave, I will beat you to death. And I'm like, I didn't remember that at all. And it's like you know that like he wouldn't
No, he
actually, but it's
wouldn't.
like it's like it shows how desperate he is because he's acting or saying things that are like so outside of the realm of like what he normally would say to Fitz.
Well, and he knows that if Fitz leaves, he'll first of all revert back fully to a wolf. He won't be Fitz anymore. And secondly, like if someone finds him and recognizes who he is, like Fitz will have a worse death than the first one. So I think that Burrich is doing it out of like fear for Fitz's life. So he threatens Fitz's life to save it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's all out of love, which is like very rarely can you say that about someone threatening to beat someone else to death, but you know.
Right. One thing that puzzled me is Burrich is like packing up. I don't remember what he's packing up for, but Fitz says one thing I remember. It was remembered. It was shiny and curved like a moon, and had smelled of blood when I first got it. I'd fought another for it. I could not remember that I had wanted it, but I had fought and won it. I did not want it now. And like it mentions that it's on a chain, but I do not remember what that is at all. Do you guys remember?
No.
I have no fucking clue. I was hoping you guys would know. I'm gonna go back and like try to find like the full passage and see if like there's
Yeah, I
any
was like,
context clues.
I reread it like 3 times, being like, what is that? Like, clearly this is a reference to something. And I don't remember, and it's not like it's been a bunch of times since we read the other two, you know? We're reading them
Yeah.
like back. I don't remember what it is. It was bugging me a lot.
I can't like
Was
it smelled of blood when I first got it. Who would have
And it was on, it's
could
like,
it be like the stuff that he got from the Red Ship Raider captain? Like because like
did he take a necklace from him or something?
yeah.
I remember because the Out Islander was like because the Out Islander on his crew was like, you should have this.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Okay.
That's definitely it.
Okay.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay. Whew.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Wow. The fact
Like,
that
I don't know. I can't even believe that he held on to that because they never mention it elsewhere after. Like he just
Yeah.
I guess. Oh, and Burge is taking it to sell it so that he can provide for Molly, which is what Fitz was saving it for.
Yeah.
He sold everything.
Mhm.
And he had to.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Burrich, it's at the beginning of this chapter. Fitz tries to like communicate to Burrich through the wit because he's not really talking anymore. And so he says, Night Eyes waits. I told him. Then I remembered he could not hear me. I thought he could if he would try, but he would not try. And that definitely strengthens my theory that the skill is just an offshoot of the wit, right? Like,
I would think so. Like if he's putting up walls so that he can't hear, that's very skillish.
yeah. And although, like, I think that they did branch off and the skill, like, went its own way. And that's why, like, even though Burrich, it can be, like, closed off from the skill completely, he can still use the wit because they are now separate magics. But I think that they definitely started off as the wit. Because if people can communicate to each other close by with the wit, Like, that's the skill, you guys.
Right.
It's
Well, and
it's like the same mechanism.
Yeah.
we also don't see the wit or the skill really in Live Ships or Rain Wilds. We really just see it in the Fitz books because it needs Islander and Six Duchies blood. And you're not getting Islander or Six Duchies blood in Live Ships or Rain Wilds. You're just getting like Bing Towners or Rain Wilders.
Well, I think also it's like I think that in Live Ships and Rain Wilds, they don't call I think they have the wit and the skill, but it's one thing and they don't call it anything because it's not something that they know a lot about, and it's whatever.
Just the way they communicate with the dragons, right?
Yeah, and the Live Ships, and it's just a mingling of both, which is probably just the wit then.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
some
like
people
the
can't
way they
hear
like
the
feel the
dragons.
live ships, it's sort of like the live ships have wit because they're dragons.
Yeah.
And like
And
I think it's just like every person has like the inner capacity for the wit and the skill. It's just that like people have like different levels of being able to like manifest it. But it's just that like the live ships and the dragons are just like so powerful that they can just reach out and like tap into that for communicating. Like that's the vibe I got.
I don't know if everyone does though, because some people
just
genuinely
the
think
dragons
that
growling.
dragons are like being animals. They don't hear them
Mhm.
talking and they can't communicate with them at all. I do think it's
Fair.
interesting though that some people can't hear the dragons or talk to the dragons, but everybody can talk to the live ships.
I think it's because the live ships have like their face,
Like,
so they
the
can
person-
physically talk and like use their body to communicate, but I think it's also like stepping onto the deck of the live ship is such a direct connection that like I'm sure people would be able to kind of do that same thing with the dragons if the dragons let them touch them. But the dragons are like, no, I would never let an ant on my body. You're like so disgusting. So of course they're like separate. But I
You're
think that
so disgusting. Meanwhile, for the keepers, did you clean
Clean.
Did you clean right there, that spot under my wing where the dirt always gets? You know I hate it.
Yeah. There's something else. I think that the dragons definitely use the skill because it's got to be like a mixture of both. But I think that like wouldn't they make people be able to hear them with the skill, or are people like still
They
Well, I
definitely
think
imprint skill commands on people, like
they-
100%.
even
that
if they
and that's
hear
how
it?
Nettle communicates with Tintaglia. It's definitely a skill.
Mhm. Like again, like I think that like the dragons are probably like the origin of the skill, just wholesale.
I agree.
Well, I think they might be the origin of both.
Both, yeah.
If the wit was like an offshoot of it, or if they kind of like developed similarly.
I sort of feel like, yeah, like I guess it depends on like the timeline of when all. If I just feel like all of the animals sort of just like had the wit, and then the dragons were just like more sentient, and then that sort of like developed into the skill.
Yeah, I can see that.
Let's ask Robin Hobb.
Can we? What if we got her on for a Q&A? I would die. I would die.
Yeah, I would be really scared.
Mhm.
I would just be like,
I don't know if that would happen. I would love it.
probably not, but we can dream.
Right.
What would be cool is if we like get a list of questions. Like I don't. Does she do con appearances these days? I mean, obviously not like right now in COVID
Yeah,
times, but like
I think so.
I think so.
yeah, if she does con appearances, I would love to like just like head out and like just ask her some
Can we do a field
questions.
trip?
Mhm. Um,
One thing that I had to laugh about in this chapter was Fitz calling Burrich's scowl an eye snarl, because we know exactly what that look is, even though Fitz is calling it something differently. Like, this is Burrich's classic scowl, and I love it.
Yeah, I love how like it's not overwrought. It's just like another term for the same thing, and like
Yeah.
it feels like so believably like um having the mindset of an animal and trying to find metaphors for human behaviors that like
Yeah.
you can't find an like the same way that like Fitz like calls like Night Eyes' things like a grin or like his tongue lolling and he's smiling, like stuff that like if you just look at it as human would not read as that emotion, but Fitz has that connection and can like feel that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this because like Fitz is like remembering it was not good in the same way that being hungry or thirsty was not good, where it's like animals don't really have like that emotional absence, but then you like compare that like psychological feeling to like stuff they do have like experience of. So yeah, again, like just like the entire way that this chapter is written always blows me away.
Me too.
Is this the chapter where I don't think I put this in my notes, but it kind of made me laugh when they say something about it being winter up in the mountains, and Burrich says, "I hope Ketrican got there safely," and Fitz's like knee-jerk response is, "Well, if she didn't, it's not Sooty's fault."
Yes, that
Yeah,
is
no, that's his chapter.
And Burrich just like didn't really react because he's like, "Oh my god, he said something about Sooty." Like he's like, "What more will he say?" But it's just funny that like all he cared about was being like, "Well, it's not Sooty's fault if she didn't."
Yeah, don't blame my horse. She's a good girl. It's Ketrican's fault.
Which I'm sure that's not what he meant. Poor Fitz.
It just was such a like childish response that it made me laugh.
Mhm.
Well, and it brings back the connection because Fitz kind of got a little bit jealous thinking about someone else riding Sooty, even though it was Ketrican. So, like, I love that emotion, even though Fitz doesn't want to recognize and remember it, is still in there so deep that he has to, like, talk about Sooty when Ketrican is brought up.
And they hadn't mentioned in that passage that like anyone had left with Ketrican. He just says something about Ketrican. So it's like it's still in Fitz's head that she left with Sooty and Reddy in the Fool. And like I don't know, I just loved that part where he's like, "Well, it's not Sooty's fault if she didn't."
I love
Yeah,
that, like,
that was so good.
every other like the parts of his lives that are with like humans are still like painful to acknowledge and think about. But then he's like, I love my horse. She's great.
Yeah.
That was his first, like, real big responsibility. That's one of his best girls.
I forget what ends up happening to Sooty.
I have no idea. I think maybe Burrich gets her back.
Maybe.
I like to pretend like she lived on forever and she went to Withywood's with Fitz.
Because Burrich has stables at Withywood's, right? I
Yeah.
think Ketrican lets him have like some good horses to go start kind of his stable breeding thing again. So maybe Sooty and Reddy end up with him there.
What's the horse that like I know that the horse that like Fitz escapes on later on in Tradeford is like some Buckkeep horse. I just don't remember what it was.
Yeah, it's
I don't
like
think it's
some
I don't think it's
noble's
Sooty.
horse.
Got you, okay. But yeah.
I don't remember what its name is though. The only other horse whose name I remember is My Black because it's like just so stupid that
Okay, I
Fitz
thought you were gonna say
his horse
Malta because that's
My
also one that I
Black.
love.
Oh yeah, Malta. I forgot about Malta.
Yeah, Fitz definitely needs help naming things. He
He's
can't
terrible.
be trusted to name something on his own. Thank God Night Eyes gave us his name because I can't imagine what he would have named him.
No.
It would have been like Wolfie or Gray or something stupid.
Something stupid, right?
Night Eyes would just not accept it. He's like, no.
He'd be like,
Yeah,
I've never thought about my own name, but I need to think of one now because my God. I love it, and it's like the opposite is like Fitz, who's like, "Give me a name, spare some names for a poor orphan boy."
The end of this chapter made me sad when Fitz is kind of back to himself and Chade comes to visit and he says, "I thought we'd done something worse than let you die." And Fitz's response was, "I was kind to the old man. I did not tell him that they had." Like,
That's such a painful line.
That line has stuck with me since the first time I read this book, like 6 years ago. even longer now. But like that, I remembered that, and I was like, yeah, that's fucking rough.
Very sad.
And then like, what was it? It always like surprises me because like Fitz blames Burrich and Chade like indirectly here and then like very very directly in the next chapter for like bringing him back to life. But like whenever the fool is like beating himself up over like I keep bringing you back even though it'd be kinder to let you die. Fitz is like, oh no, like what are you talking about? And I don't know if it's like just Fitz is like doesn't feel like he's forced into these things by the fool because he feels like they're on even footing, or if just Fitz just dumb and doesn't like quite believe the fool when like the fool talks about the prophetic things that the fool can do.
I think it's that. I think that Fitz still doesn't have a grasp or understanding of it. So he like, if the fool wasn't directly like part of bringing Fitz back to life or like having all these horrible things happen to him, then he doesn't
He just doesn't see the cause and effect.
Yeah, or the connection or anything like that.
There's a line where it says, for Burrich, he is not bigger than I. This is when they're like tussling and fighting. And that just surprised me because even like after his like limp or injury or whatever, I always imagined like Burr just like a towering hulk of a man. So like just hearing that he's shorter than Fitz just like surprised, like it jarred my mental image. I'm like, huh?
Yeah. I always picture Burrich as taller just because like he's older. And that's what Fitz does, so that's what I always do. Older equals taller, younger equals shorter.
Ooh.
And it's like pretty clear that Burrich could beat literally anybody in a fight. And you
I think,
imagine
Burrich beat a horse in a fight. You're not taking
yeah, like you imagine someone that could take anyone as being this like Hulk person.
Gigantic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Said Burrich is a short king.
Yeah.
Well, Fitz is pretty tall, right?
Yeah, that's fair. We always have like Mistress Hasty being like, "Oh, you've grown up so much," and then Patience being like, "You stand like a stork," which always makes me imagine like tall and greedy.
Poor Fitz. He can't win.
Mm.
Something that I was surprised about was how quickly Verity was here. Like, I didn't realize that he was kind of with Fitz during this a little bit, or like at least tried to be. Because Fitz, when he's still mostly wolf, he says, and sometimes there was another with Night Eyes and me, another who thought with us. He was very small, but he was there. I did not want him there. I didn't want anyone there ever again except Night Eyes and me. He knew that and made himself so small that most of the time he was not there. And I'm like, oh my god, like that's Verity. What the heck?
I would love to pick Verity's brain about what it was like to be in there.
Yeah.
Like, to be the fly on the wall of Fitz and Night Eyes just like doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he was like, what the fuck is going on back at Buckkeep?
Yeah, he was definitely scared for Fitz, I can imagine. And then I love...
How do you even process that if you don't know like the physical thing that's happening of like Fitz dying and then coming back to life?
Right.
Well, he knew that Fitz was witted, so...
if he thought Fitz died. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he knew Fitz was witted, but like no one knows enough about the wit, so I'm sure he was like, what is the extent of this? Like, is he literally actually a wolf right now?
Well, if Verity was sitting in on Fitz like he did in the past, he probably overheard Chade and Burrich talking about things that Fitz wasn't listening to. So he could like pick up and like I think he probably caught at least a little bit of the gist of what's going on and why Fitz is the way he is.
That's fair.
And then I love that Verity is still strong in the skill to like convince Fitz to continue drinking and drink and drink and drink so that he lowers his weight even more so that he can get word to them. And then the fact that they don't even like believe it, I hate that because
I know.
Like Fitz wouldn't just randomly talk about Verity for the first thing, and he would never say Verity's alive because he's still a wolf. Like, he doesn't think about that stuff.
And he
I
says
think
like
if
he's
Fitz
cold.
had yeah. I was gonna say, like, if he'd just say Verity's alive, it could just be like a hope thing. But then when he says like Verity's cold and he's hungry, it's like, okay, those that's like specific enough that like you should be taking note of it.
Right.
And it's not like Fitz is taking on his own things and just calling it Verity to try and like get more food or something, like how a little kid could say that, like about like an invisible friend or something. Like, this is very different, and they should have known that.
Right. I do like when he says, like Burrich is trying to convince him to drink the brandy. He's like, no, that's bad water. We never liked it. And Burrich is like, we used to drink it all the time. He's like, we never liked it, but it was cheap. It's like, are you in college?
Look, Fitz knew what to do. He's
Right.
a smart guy sometimes.
And I love it. It just like Fitz, you literally you have like the king's wallet behind you, and meanwhile you're like, time to drink the cheapest shit I can, absolutely rancid.
Tightest purse.
Mhm.
No money spent for me, just a copper piece.
Mhm.
On the money note, it gives me so much anxiety when he's like just spending money willy-nilly later on in this book. At like he's like spending money on beer, and I'm always like, you don't need beer. You're gonna need food later. Like,
Yeah.
do better. He's not good with money.
Fitz is like, I am a survivor. Meanwhile, he's like, help, my family is dying. Please help me balance this budget. The room, one copper piece. Food, 2 copper piece. Ale, 3 silver pieces. Just and it's just like, dog.
He gets money and then he spends it like immediately.
I think, though, that he kind of is comfortable and like knows that he doesn't have to worry about where his next meal is coming from, because Night Eyes and him, like, they hunt so well, and like even without Night Eyes or like without relying on him, Fitz has caught 5 fish just by himself. So like, food isn't the biggest worry for him. But I mean, it's not like he can make his own ale, so he's got to do something.
But like also like even earlier he was thinking about like, okay, I can't find someone to take me on a boat here in Buck because they'd recognize me. But like, couldn't you save the money and then get someone to take you up the Vin River later? It's just
Yeah,
like it feels like weirdly impractical in a way that like I just would not expect from like survival Fitz.
I think it's also him trying to gain information, and he knows that he kind of has to spend some money in order to get some of the like he's been out of it for a while, so he really doesn't know what's going on. And I think that's the only way that he can like hear trustworthy gossip.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think my last note for this chapter is Fitz is like when Fitz is like having a nightmare about the torture and he wakes up, he's like, at that moment I rejected and despised myself so completely that I desired only to destroy everything that was me or bordered on myself. Which I I'm still salty about this, but like every time I always think about like that one person on Reddit who's like, "Ah, people are just forcing this book to be about depression in these days," and I'm like, how do you read that shit and be like, people are just forcing this interpretation on the book. There's no textual evidence thereof.
It's happy. What are you talking about?
God.
Fitz is like a walking encyclopedia for mental illnesses.
Oh yeah.
DSM-5 looking motherfucker out here. I was noting in the prologue, I didn't actually say this earlier, but then Fitz is at one point, he's like, I found it difficult to keep my mind long fixed on a single topic. And I'm like, it's interesting because like I was wondering if like, because I don't know much about it, but I was wondering if you did a reading of this series for like ADHD, what that would like come up with for Fitz. Because it feels like there are like some moments where it feels like he can be very focused, but others where he's like incredibly scatterbrained. So like it would be interesting. I think that's like more like whatever than like the I'm depressed and anxious and like traumatized whole portion of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know enough about ADHD, but I think
PTSD.
yeah, he absolutely has depression and PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Or
Oh, yeah,
Fitz
and
is
right after that,
Mhm.
right after that, he says, "I repel savagely at the entire world, almost displacing my consciousness." And I'm like, what the fuck would have happened had he succeeded? Like, he's not like displacing it as like, is there like a wit stream that you just like join the wit consciousness? Like because he keeps talking about like later on like suicide by skill current or whatever. But like if he'd succeeded on displacing himself through the wit, what would have happened?
I think he
I
probably
just
just
would have
gone passed out or gone into night eyes, like the way, because he's basically displacing his consciousness when he leaves his body at the end of Royal Assassin.
Got you. So just like return to wolf.
I guess. I don't know though.
I think that's what made this like way scarier. Because like I think like we have like experience of the skill current and all of that, but this like felt like so jarring and to me because it's just like uncharted territory.
Yeah. Something that kind of confused me was when Fitz is like starting to remember things, and he's talking about the things that start to have meaning now because he's got to remember. And he says, names took on meanings and faces again. Patience, Lacey, celerity, and sooty were no longer simple words, but rang as rich as chiming bells with memories and emotions. Why is celerity one of the names that he chooses to mention, and not like Molly or Ketrican?
I think
feel like
he's
you
still
have your own
suppressing
thoughts and
those.
opinions on that one.
I do. I like to think that he's got a little crush on celerity.
It's interesting
I
because
took
I
it
think
as he was like suppressing the things that would hurt the most, which is like thinking about the plan that went so wrong with Ketrican and then like thinking about Molly leaving him.
fair. Like, see, that's what I was thinking as well. But then, why is patience in the mix?
Mm-hmm.
Because patience is like one of the most sore spots. Might have just been like a writing oversight. Because I can definitely see like 3 of the 4, Lacey, Celerity, and Sudi, feel like the parts of his life he would be totally fine engaging with, and that don't have like trauma attached. But yeah,
I just liked that it was in there. I was like, okay, Fitz.
yeah, it is definitely like weirdly out of because like of all the characters, there's even like some other minor characters you could have gone for. Like you could have gone for like Cook Sarah or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But he chose celerity. Because he does like her.
This is gonna be celerity watch. Just
Yes. We have 15 different types of watches at this point.
Okay, so after all the trauma of this chapter, my last note is just like in the intro they talk about like Chalced and slavery. And in talking about Chalced, they mentioned the libraries of Jep and the fabled fountains and baths at St. John's. And I'm like, oh cool. I can some name drops I can look out for in Rain Wilds because now we're actually like starting to see like a Chalced perspective, at least because I'm just starting City of Dragons, so I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know. It's a 50-50 on whether this is just random thing that Hobb made up and never returned to, or hey, is this actually gonna like come back in a weird way? Yeah,
I genuinely do not remember, so you'll have to let us know.
Yeah, I don't either.
Hey, do you guys have any other notes for this chapter?
No, other than this was sad, and I'm depressed now. That's it.
Oh man, if you're depressed now, just
Oof,
wait until
yeah.
this next one.
No, it does not get better.
So, chapter 2, The Parting. So, Fitz now fully come into himself. Essentially, is trying to figure out what to do next with Chade and Burrich. And all at once, Fitz's resentment comes out, and he just sort of goes off on Burrich in a pretty unfair rant. He also ends up cutting ties with Chade. Burrich recalls a portion of his history to Fitz, And then finally, at the very end of this chapter, Fitz resolves that now, with all of his ties to his past life gone, he is free to go kill Regal, and resolves to do that.
Him yelling at Burrich is like one of the hardest things to read.
Yeah.
It's so mean, but also like true, which makes it more mean.
It makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's like Fitz says, like, it was true only in the way that someone who knows you best knows how to hurt you. And then it's like it's that, but it's also just like it's the stuff that you don't say to someone, even if it is true.
I had misremembered, and I thought that like this was the last conversation that they really have. So I was relieved when Burrich came back and like told him about his history, because they don't like make up, but they at least aren't leaving with that being like the last thing they ever say to each other. You know,
Yeah.
they actually have like a goodbye.
The
But
one time where Hobb decides to inflict a little less pain as a treat.
right.
She easily could have made that the last conversation they ever had. It could have been Chade who comes back to the cabin and tells him, like, hey, we've
You need to
decided we
leave.
have to leave you now.
Right.
Yeah, it's rough. And this reminds me, I was talking about this before we started recording. It reminds me of like being a teenager and lashing out and saying all these horrible things to like a parent just because you're kind of like a shitty teenager. And that's exactly what it reminded me of, like, and I mean, Fitz is kind of acting like it too. But I think he's speaking more out of a place of like trying to recover from his trauma and like also not deal with it. And so he's angry at everything and just tries to push it all away.
Yeah, he's not good at being human right now.
No. But I'm mad at Chade because like he didn't have to continue the fight the way that he did and like bring up things for him. And also, if Chade was giving Fitz the guidance that he needed as like an apprentice and like Chade being his mentor, I think half the shit that happened in Royal Assassin wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because Fitz would have had an adult looking out for him and telling him like, no, don't do this, or like keep an eye on this, or be careful about this. But Chade is too busy taking care of Shrewd that he like doesn't care about anything else, doesn't notice anything else, even though we all know that Shrewd's gonna die anyways. So Chade should be looking to the future and how he can kind of like help the transition from King Shrewd to like Kettrican or whoever is going to have to rule the kingdom after. But he doesn't care. And then he yells at Fitz.
He's like, when were you calm and thoughtful? When were you merry with your friends? When were you simply at peace? And I'm like, Chade, you're literally telling this kid like for months that like, oh, the Red Ship Raiders are here. We're at the verge of civil war. You have to do everything. We have to protect the kingdom. And it's like you put the weight of the entire kingdom on his shoulders and be like, wow, dude, you're
pretty tough.
angsty, like wild.
Yeah, like what?
And then also like he's kind of right about the impulsiveness, but Chade refuses to follow the thread back and like realize that the reason that Fitz is impulsive is because of how restricted he is through Chade, and how like Chade doesn't give him outlets to have his own life.
Yeah.
And then also like he blames Fitz for the fucking civil war and not trusting Chade over Shrewd's health, and it's like, no, both of those are squarely on Shade's shoulders for being the most passive motherfucker known to man.
Yeah. And for not giving Fitz the guidance that he needs. If Chade was present and aware of everything that was going on and like was that person that Fitz could communicate and bounce ideas off of, like none of this shit would have happened. But because he shuts down all of the talk about like the treasonous talk about Regal being this like evil person, he shuts down like everything. he doesn't let Fitz talk. So, like, what does he expect? Fitz is going to go off and do his own thing because he doesn't have anyone to help him.
It also just like as soon as he came back from the mountains, everyone kind of was like gaslighting him about what happened. Like, he says, you've been spoiling for a fight ever since you came back. And it's like, well, duh. Regal tried to murder him. And everyone, like Shrewd, Chade, Verity, everyone apart
I
from
do not
Burrich
see
was
it.
like, it okay, baby prince, say sorry. Like, no, it's not okay. And like Regal gets no consequences. Everyone's like, just get over it, Fitz. Like, it won't happen again. I promise.
And then it does.
Like, I would
And I'm
be
like, oh my god, I'm so
off in the world,
sorry.
too.
Like, I should have protected you. Yeah, you should have. You should
Right.
have. Shame on all of you.
Yeah, and they keep putting it on him that like, oh, you kept acting like a boy, and it's like he's literally a kid. You
Yeah,
guys are the adults. You guys are doing jack shit. Or like, yeah, like Burrich less so because Burrich doesn't have the power, but like,
Yeah.
Chade is like, oh, why can't I rely on you to do everything right all the time? And again, I think it comes back to ego. Like Chade does think he's perfect, so he's like, oh, something went wrong. It must be not with me.
Yeah, not something I did. I feel like Burrich is the only one in Royal Assassin that Fitz can really turn to and just lay everything out. And like, there's not much
Burrich
Burrich
is
can do
insanely
besides
supportive in
listen.
Royal Assassin. I forgot like how much he goes to like just like being like, Fitz, you're great. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Don't stop. Like,
Yeah, it's such a change from their relationship in Assassin's Apprentice to like Royal Assassin, and I just love like how they grew and became so much closer and all of that stuff. But like, it sucks that he's kind of the only adult who's actually listening to Fitz and like being there for him and making time for him and all of that stuff.
and then like Fitz goes off on him instead of Chade. It's
Yeah.
okay. There's the line here where it's like the shock in his eyes was the same as if I had suddenly plunged a knife into him, and then that reminded me of the old. It's easier to pull a knife out of a man than take back the impact of one's words.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also Fitz is like to Burge, he has to stop doing things that I can never pay him back for, and I'm like, he never will stop doing those things.
Oh, that's what a parent does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I wish I could just like quote entire paragraphs here because this chapter is so juicy. This is like the juiciest chapter in like so long. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but like just like the whole thing about like Fitz like ruminating about like, okay, choosing my identity as a man or versus as a wolf, and then like if I am a person, who am I now? That like I'm no longer a king's man, I'm no longer an assassin, I'm no longer any of these things. What am I without these roles that I've like defined myself by? And it's like it's like so juicy on like a character and thematic level, and I'm just like, I want to pull this line, I want to pull this line. Like, the choice was simple: be a wolf with no past, no future, only today, or be a man twisted by his past, whose heart pumped fear with his blood. And it's like, Fitz does some really stupid stuff here, but I think the choice to become a person again is like such. Even the way he frames it for himself is like such like a monumental choice to actually choose to be human again. And so I'm proud of him for choosing that route.
Oh yeah, me too. One thing that I saw that reminded me of my little favorite love triangle was Burrich talking about, I think this is when he's talking about his past and he's talking about chivalry. And he says, then the rest of the day he'd have me at his heels, like a dog, you say. I don't know why. Maybe he was lonely for someone his age. Maybe he missed Verity. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he had a crush on you. I think it's a big crush. They like each other.
Like, okay, the maybe I don't know is like so like, oh, ayo, what?
have a crush. They have a crush. They have a crush. They like each other.
Mhm.
That's the end. Like, that's it in my brain. I love it.
mean, yeah, like I'm trying to think, like, what else could that maybe I don't know
You
be?
cannot convince me otherwise. Like, chivalry, saw Burrich fighting and was like, damn, I like that. And then he kept him around because he liked him. And then they like each other. And
I
he
feel
just
like it started as the first one where he was lonely for someone his age, and then it like as he grew to new Burrich, it kind of like that's why he like kept him around.
yeah. That was my little spark of happiness throughout this depressing ass chapter. I was like, at least my boy still has his love.
And then later on, Shade is like, because Fitz at one point is like, you guys all kept me, Burrich kept me as his stable boy, you kept me as your assassin boy, whatever, whatever. And then when Burrich comes back, Shade has told him the same thing, but instead of taking the message away of like, you guys have imposed too much control on me, the he's like, oh no, because you've been everybody's boy, you've never learned to grow up and be a man, and so you're super impulsive. And it's like, you're right, but also like stop like avoiding or deflecting the cause of he refuses to accept, like he's like, oh, I get it, Fitz, I get what you're saying, and then just like completely misses the fact that like he's been imposing restrictions on Fitz. Or he just like takes that as a given, which is so frustrating.
I think that Burrich kind of he words it and understands it a little bit better than Shade does when he says to Fitz, I think you decide as an animal would, always in the now with never a thought for tomorrow or what you recall from yesterday. And I think that that is so much more on point to what, like, the way that Fitz thinks, because we see Fitz do this. Like, when he is with Molly and Patience, like, drops the hint that like she could get pregnant, and Fitz is like, oh, I need to like make sure I don't do this, but then the next day he forgets or like doesn't think about it. And the same thing happens with something else that I can't remember, but like we see Fitz doing this, and maybe it is a little bit of Night Eyes rubbing off on him.
Well, he does that for his whole life too, because I remember getting like irritated or frustrated with him in the beginning of Royal Assassin, because he'd be like, I'm going to do this for B, and then he would forget, and then he'd be like, I'm not being good enough for B because I keep forgetting to do things for her or take care of her. And it's like, oh my God, like, just stop saying you're gonna do things and then not doing them. Like,
Leave some sticky notes on the mirrors.
right.
Remind yourself
He's
to take
so
care of your daughter.
He's so focused on like whatever comes up that he just puts everything on the back burner and then forgets about it.
Yeah, so he definitely does live more animal than, I think impulsive isn't the right way to describe what Fitz does. And I think that Burrich has it down so much better than Shade did.
Well, and like
Because he can understand himself too.
The way
What we
he
get for later on.
approached like Justin and Serene was impulsive, but that was because Shade gave him drugs. Like,
and kerosene, no less. Like, are you kidding me?
right,
Anything else would have
him
been
like
better.
Coke or whatever. It's like then he went on a rampage. No, duh. Like he couldn't think thoughts well because you gave him strong drugs.
Yeah.
He is like so quick to blame Fitz for his actions, but then refuses to acknowledge that he enables or like shapes those actions every
He's
second
like,
of Fitz's
you
life.
took the drugs that I gave you. It's your fault.
Yeah, I think it's like Burrich.
Meanwhile, Burrich has it right where he's
give
like, did you have to give him kerosene? Could you not?
Yeah.
And like, Shade is like, he would have gone and done it anyways. And it's like, is your responsibility as the adult in the situation to, if he's going to do it, just, you can drag him with you. You can literally just be like, come along now. Like,
And there's no way that Fitz could have done anything that he did because he was so debilitated from his headache, from skilling. Like, he would not have left the king's chamber without the kerosene if Chade had not given him some kind of drug.
But yeah, like coming back around to, I think the interesting thing about like Night Eyes and like living as a wolf is I feel like Fitz has always had this like desire to run away. Like I think it's like in Assassin's Apprentice, there's like one point where he's looking out in the darkness and he's like, I could just run off, right? But then he like ends up walking back to the castle. It's just like Night Eyes like gives him this enabler to actually do that. And I kind of feel the same way about like Girl on a Dragon, where it's like in this chapter he's like Burrich is asking, you leave a life behind with what? The clothes on your back and an earring? And you say there's nothing you wish brought to you. Does that not strike you as strange? And it's like, this is this is even before he gets like forged away, but he still has that eagerness to like leave his life behind and like leave his identity behind. So it's like, it's just that like if he hadn't had these like almost supernatural enablers for this like self-destructive behavior, he wouldn't have latched onto it or been able to go in on it as much as he ends up doing. I think I have one more note where like Fitz is talking with Chade and Chade is like, why did you do that? And then Fitz is like, I don't know. And then right afterwards he's like, I lied so well. And I'm like, Fitz, you're so fucking stupid. Like
Yeah.
that's the worst lie. Like that's like you need to have an actual answer instead of like, nah, fucking yeah, you know, wild.
Yeah, mumbly and stuff.
Yeah.
Because
I always love like Fitz being like, I'm a fucking great assassin. And then like I love like how later on like in the tavern he's like, shit, I don't have a fake name, Cobb. Yeah. And then it's like he's like finally forced to face the reality that he's like he's not that good a liar. He's a fucking miserable liar.
He's kind of sucky.
Mm-hmm.
I think my last note is the final conversation with Fitz and Burrich where like Fitz is talking about Patience being right about Molly and all of that stuff. I kind of feel like it could be read as like miscommunication and misunderstanding between the two, because I feel like Burrich might think now that Fitz finally knows that Molly was talking about leaving him for their child, and Fitz is still under the impression that it was another man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought it was a misunderstanding, but I thought it was that like Burrich thought that Fitz knew that Burrich was going to go see her, and then realizes, or like was going and seeing her, and then realizes like, oh, Fitz is just still on this like, thinks that like there's this imaginary like lover or whatever for Molly. I forget the first line because like I think the first line it feels like I don't think it had like a romantic connotation. It was just like, yeah, whoever's seeing her and taking care of her, and Burrich is like, oh, did he find me out? I got the vibe of like, oh, did he find me out? Yeah.
I think it could be all of that. It was first Burrich is like nervous because Fitz thinks that he knows, or he thinks that Fitz knows that he's going to see Molly, and then later he's thinking that Fitz knows that Molly's pregnant, even though Fitz doesn't know any of this shit. He's still just as clueless as the last book.
You'd think Fitz would figure it out like after like Burrich comes back with the smell of Molly on his cloak, and it's like, do some critical thinking, put 2 and 2 together.
But I don't think he's ever been good at math. I guess.
Much more of an arts guy.
Oh, definitely, with his sea pipes.
Mm-hmm. And his actual art. He's a good painter.
That's true.
It is really cute and sad that when he like recognizes that scent, and he's too wolf still to realize it's Molly. He just knows it's familiar. But he like takes the cloak when Burrich isn't looking and like lays it by the fire and sleeps on it. It's like that's really cute and really sad.
My whole heart.
I know.
He misses her and he just wants something comforting, and that's all. Like, all she ever was so comforting and nurturing to him, and like he doesn't have that in his life right now.
Right.
Okay, do we have anything else for this chapter?
Mm-mm.
Okay, chapter 3, the quest. Ooh, we're really getting into it. So in this chapter, Fitz and Burrich actually part ways forever. Um, and then Fitz decides to start preparing to leave for to kill Regal, but ends up getting derailed by living as a wolf again, and only kind of breaks out of it and realizes that he has to leave once Forged Ones come into the cabin and destroy all of his supplies. And he's like, okay, I truly have nothing left for myself here. Time to set out. Which also, like, I forgot to mention, I think that, like, one thing that was really great about the last chapter is, like, at the ending where, like, it's just, like, the last line is like, cool, I am now free to go kill Regal. Because I feel like it just completely blindsides you after a chapter that's already been super impactful, and we don't get a hint that Fitz is thinking about this. So just having that thought come out of nowhere is like, oh, damn, okay, he does have a purpose now.
Yeah, his purpose is definitely to do whatever he can do to kill Regal, but then he immediately gets distracted by being a wolf and, like, hangs around for the whole summer.
And I love how, like, Fitz is like, Chade isn't right, I'm not impulsive. And then, like, immediately the first thing that he decides to do is, I'm gonna go and kill Regal at all costs.
I think it's like a suicide mission. Like, I have nothing to care about anymore. I can't go back to my life. I don't have a girlfriend. Burrich hates me. Shade hates me.
He
Patients
doesn't have
can't
a
know I'm
wife,
alive.
remember. She's not just his girlfriend, she's his wife.
Oh, his wife, yeah. Like, he's like, well, if I don't want to really be around, so if I kill Regal, then I won't have to worry about anything else.
He's got nothing else to live for. That's
Right.
the only thing, like, keeping him living his life.
Revenge. But then Night Eye says to hunt that one is as wise as to go hunting a porcupine. And Fitz says, I cannot leave this alone, Night Eyes. And Night Eye says, I understand. I am the same about porcupines.
I think that's so cute.
Our first little glimpse of humor in the depressing ocean that is this book.
I think it's funny. Well, not funny, but, like, interesting that at the beginning right here, Night Eyes is like, yeah, like, I know why you can't leave him alone because, like, it's like your porcupine. But then later on, when Fitz is, like, dreaming and Will, like, skills into his dream, then Night Eyes truly understands, and he's like, we will not have peace ever until they're all dead. And it's such a different change. Like, he finally gets it then.
Yeah, I think it's a change of, like, I think for Night Eyes, it's like, why are we hunting this thing which doesn't bring us anything? It's like, oh, it's because we're being hunted ourselves, and so we have to hunt. It's hunt or be hunted.
Right.
It's not hunting to eat something; it's hunting to
like live.
Yeah.
Not be prey. We also, like, get more of a glimpse of Verity in this chapter, and I thought it, like, when it's kind of, I think Fitz finds him, because of course right away Verity's like, chivalry, and there was this line that, like, was so sad. He says, I thought chivalry had come back. He teetered on the edge of darkness to take this burden from me. And it's like, you know, now that he probably is trying to carve his dragon and knows he's going to have to put himself in the dragon. And he feels that burden of, like, I have to, like, leave my life or sacrifice basically my life as it is to do this.
He's even at the dragons at this point, right? Because they say he's like, he feels hunted and he's, like, cold and wary.
I think he feels hunted the entire time forever.
I think he is hunted because
he gets there and then he's like, I think he like stops feeling that way once he, like, reaches the quarry.
I don't think so, because I think that when they, like, enter the quarry, like, they see bodies. Like, there are some bodies, like, by some of the other statues or something that are like still being carved because Verity had to save himself.
And it's not just hunted physically, it's skill hunted. Like he's constantly being bombarded by people picking at him with the skill. Like he's like a hunted animal trying to protect his mind. Because like what other burden could it be other than the dragon?
I just thought it was like the burden of like the quest, like his quest to save the six duchies as a whole, or like just the quest of being like, or sorry, the burden of like.
Yeah, I guess it's like open for interpretation
because I'm the king in waiting / I'm the king, but also like
the dragon.
Yeah, the dragon makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more tangible. Hey, speaking of Verity, I like Fitz's like self-reflection here, where he's like, I did not want to think of Verity. That as much as anything told me that I should. Like this whole chapter in general feels like a really good like metaphor or like description of like relapsing into bad bad habits, but then also having the conviction to come out of them. Because like there's the whole thing of like no time, no cleanliness, no goals, no awareness of anything save eating and sleeping. So he like slips back into like this wolfish bad coping mechanism, but then like he skills out of himself to Verity, which is like something he's never managed to do before, and I'm so proud of him for like doing that.
I know, it's kind of magical. And I wonder if it took like
the no time, no cleanliness, no goals, no awareness of anything, whatever. That sounds completely like Fitz of the Cabin. How is Fitz of the Cabin writing this and not being like, huh, damn.
Yeah.
That sounds like me.
He can only self-reflect on stuff that's in the very far past, not something that's going on in his life at the present moment.
Honestly, I feel like it's true for lots of us, so,
definitely.
Fair play.
Something that I liked was a comparison that I kind of drew when Burrich is leaving and Fitz sees him go. He says, he was strong and fit, but his youth was unquestionably behind him. The days of his full strength he had spent watching over me. And that is like contrasted directly by like the way that Fitz is looking at Night Eyes when he actually kind of really deeply looks at Night Eyes and kind of just sees him as like the animal that he is. And Fitz says he was full grown now and at the peak of his strength. And I was like, oh, dang.
Yeah, it's like Night Eyes isn't a cub anymore. And we get to see like some of the start of the patented Night Eyes wit here. I don't think it's this chapter, I think it's next chapter, but I love the line where it's like, oh no, I'm not like, I forget what it was. I forget how it started, but then like Fitz is like, no, I'm just stupid, and then Night is like, I never before noticed that it made you sleep soundly, and it's like the Night is really going at him.
Yeah, I think also, I could be wrong, but I think that in this section, I think the next or the last chapter, it's chapter 4. I think that's the first time that Night Eyes calls Fitz little brother. Or did that happen in the previous book?
I don't remember if it is. That could be.
I don't remember.
Because I think that this might be the first time.
Another note I made for this chapter is Fitz says, someday a skilled king might find it handy to know that if you hurt a skilled one badly enough with a skill, you could seal him up inside himself and render him powerless in that area. And this immediately made me think of Kettle, because that's what happens with Kettle. She ends up, not by the king, but like by her own coterie, she ends up getting essentially skill blasted to the point where she can no longer access the skill.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, I guess that's just one of those things that was lost with knowledge of the skill scrolls, that such a thing was possible.
The last note that I had for this chapter is kind of a sad one, but it's Fitz and Night Eyes talking about going to Tradeford to kill Regal, and I think Night Eyes starts talking about wolves, and Fitz says, but there are wolves in Pharaoh, and there are wolves in Buck still too, just not around here. And then Night Eye says, save we two, he pointed out, and added, I should like to find wolves where we go. And then at the end of this chapter, Fitz says, out in the night, a single wolf lifted his nose and howled suddenly up to the sky, piercing the night with his loneliness and despair. And, like, I know that Night Eyes is probably howling for, like, the feeling of despair and loneliness that he feels coming from Fitz, but he definitely has his own fair share of, like, despair and loneliness that he could, like, kind of feel and draw on, because, like, he truly has never met another wolf besides his mother and siblings, who all are dead now. And, like, he is truly alone right now. Like, he is the only one of his species, and he's a pack of 2, and one of his, like, his only other pack member is a human. Like, it's not even a wolf.
Yeah, and like talking about his mother, I think you made a note of this, but then like didn't. But I think we moved over it. But like in the first chapter, when Fitz has like that dream about like Night Eyes and his mom being like smoked out and being taken, and then he's like, "It's just the same. It was just the same."
Yeah,
where it's like,
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that made me really sad.
They both do have this loneliness and sadness in them, and they have such a shared experiences. Because, like, Fitz is so alone because he's, like, ostracized even before this as, like, being a bastard, and, like, he's an outsider, and Night Eyes is alone. And then they both do get taken from their mothers in a very forceful and, I think, like, kind of traumatic way.
Right.
And they kind of have to just deal with not having family and having to make their own.
Yeah, they have to be each other's family. Like, that's like Fitz and Night Eyes are just like big trauma bonding.
Yeah.
They originally bonded over their anger, and now over like their shared despair / sadness.
Yeah.
Which I think is like really interesting, because it's like sometimes Night Eyes can feel a little detached from Fitz's pain, because he's like, yeah, just live in the moment. But he still does have loneliness.
And his dreams, as much as he can live in the moment, like day to day, his dreams always remember.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he can't outrun that.
My last note for this chapter is the Night Eyes quote: "You cannot say, to stalk this takes too long. I wish to simply eat. It is all one. The stalking is the beginning of the eating." And it's like, ah, yes, the beginning of wisdom, Night Eyes, dropping truth bombs. Where it's like, yes, that's like, Fitz is like, oh, there's too many hours in day. There's not enough hours and minutes in the day. And it's like, Fitz is like, yeah, I'm not sorry. Night Eyes is like, yeah, you humans divide up time like this. Just do it. And it's like, I find like that I found that super relatable, because I feel like there's lots of times where like I see something and I'm like, it looks so daunting. I'm like, I don't have enough time to do this. How am I going to do this? And I just started, and then it's like the time, it takes a lot of time, but then like I spend so much time worrying about how long it's going to take, and then that just wastes more time than just actually getting it done.
And Night Eyes does say that, like, time is something man made up to bother himself with. And that's exactly what we do. All we do is worry about time. Either we don't have enough, or we're running late, or like all of this stuff. But like, time is just a made up thing.
So I learned this instead of being like, I'm old. Okay, do we have any other notes for this chapter? Okay, so chapter 4, the River Road. Okay, wait. So Fitz actually leaves in this chapter. For some reason, I thought he left last chapter. My bad. So the whole Forged One thing happens in this chapter, and then Fitz finally leaves. I forget the name of the town, but he like travels a while, goes to a nearby town, goes to a tavern, and meets some traveling minstrels, and essentially is guilt tripped into accompanying them as protection on the road from Forged Ones or thieves, bandits, what have you.
Okay, I do have one thing to say. Some of these people are horrible parents to name their kids stuff. He named his daughter Piper and made her a piper. Like, that is the worst. Are you kidding me?
That's something they used to do it back in the day, right? Aren't there like there's a bunch of surnames or whatever where it's just like blacksmith's daughter or whatever, or like
right.
Like there's, I feel like I remember this a lot happening a lot in German where it's like Schumacher, and it's like, oh yeah,
My last name is German for like cleaner or something lame like that.
That's just like the profession.
I wonder if they tried to kind of take what the royals did with like naming their kids after traits that they want their kids to have, and they just took it as like, let me name my kid what profession I want them to have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, like even Starling, like that's like a songbird, right?
Yeah.
So. But yeah, here for the one thing that Fitz says is Forged Ones did not plan beyond each moment, which I think it's an interesting parallel to Fitz after he ends up being partially forged. He doesn't plan beyond each moment. And also, Night Eyes would be offended, but also an interesting parallel to like a wolves, where it's like there is that like return to the baser instinct of just like we're in the moment, we need to like, because they're like, yeah, I'm hungry, I'm going to go find something to eat. And then it's just like the thing that separates like Night Eyes and other animals is like they still have compassion for their family and their pack, and the witted don't. Yeah.
And they can think about others, like they can care for their pack mates and members, and the Forged Ones definitely are just on their own.
Speaking of the Forged Ones, they call Fitz dreams too loud. And like I remember that they are somehow drawn to skilling, but I don't remember if that's because of their like inherent loss of humanity or if it's because the Pale Woman was like, well, they were being forged, kind of putting into them this like mission to seek out skilled ones.
One way or the other. I think the implication is it's supposed to be like just sort of like somehow they're open to the skill in some way or like they're sensitive to it. But like I have no clue.
I took it as like because the skill is like used for forging, that it's like it's like one of the only things that they really remember and like feel and stuff like that. And so they go towards it because it's like something that's scary and it's something that they want to destroy so that they don't like I think they can probably they can't feel fear, but like I think feeling the skilling is the closest thing to like feeling fear or something that they would have, and it poses a danger to them, so they're like, we need to get rid of this as soon as possible, and that's why they're kind of drawn to it.
I didn't have many notes for this chapter, and I think like my only other note was just like when Fitz is like staring at Honey and Piper, and it's like, I surmised I had been rude and turned my eyes away. Meanwhile, they're both looking at him like, hubba hubba hubba. And it just like later he's like, I looked away from her, totally mystified as to why she would wish to peck at me like this. And it's like, Fitz, no game chivalry out here.
Yeah.
Like, it's always so funny, like how clueless Fitz is to like how attractive he is.
Yeah.
This is scarred, broken nose Fitz.
I had a couple.
Perfect.
What was that? Sorry.
Amber would call it perfect. His
Yes.
broken nose.
Nothing could ruin that face.
I had a couple notes from this one. One thing that stood out was this quote from Night Eyes when Fitz is like frantically searching for his pin that Shrewd gave him that he left, or that was in that shirt that the Forge one put on. He's getting like really anxious and looking everywhere for it, and Night Eyes is getting anxious because he's anxious. And Night Eye says, it was just a thing from yesterday, a thing no longer here. It's not a thorn in your paw or a pain in your belly. And I feel like that's like a good thing. I don't know, I put that quote in my notes app too, just because I think it's like a nice thing to remember if you feel like sad or anxious about something that is just a thing, you know? It's like, you're healthy. It's just like a thing that isn't here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent advice for like when you're trying to sleep at like 2 a.m. and then just like, remember this really embarrassing thing you did in middle school? And it's like, no!
Right. Also, one thing that I noticed this read that I did not notice was that they're talking about everything that Patience is doing in Buckkeep because she's such a freaking badass. And she's like the lady of Buckkeep now, but it mentions that she sold this ruby necklace that Chivalry gave her. And Fitz says that she told him that he could give it to his wife when he gets married. And I was like, that's really cute that she was going to like give him that heirloom.
Well, and the thing... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's like a glimpse into like the version of events that could have been.
I think what makes it even more special is that she thought that it was way too important and like meaningful and beautiful to even wear. So she doesn't even wear it, and she's going to pass it on to like her son, and then she has to get rid of it. And like that really shows how important it is to her and how important Buckkeep and like Buck is to her in general, then, if she's willing to get rid of such a special, like...
And how important Fitz was, because now that she thinks Fitz is dead, she probably thinks there's no reason in having it.
Yeah.
He's like, I have no one to pass it on to. Everyone is dead. Just like really sad.
That's depressing.
Right? My only other note was, now that we know that, or like we know from rereads that Regal was kind of in league with the Pale Woman, it's pretty obvious with how they mention like the Pharaoh guards and the Forged ones are just leaving each other alone. It's like, why would they leave each other alone unless Regal was in bed with the person creating?
Deliberately trying to seize the coastal duchies too.
Right. Yep.
Just one question I have is like, okay, how are these motherfuckers selling stuff in the middle of wartime when everyone does not have money and like trading ships are like not coming to the ports because there's red ships? Like, I don't think
they're selling shit upriver to like the inland duchies.
I guess I'm just like wondering, like, it always is confusing because I'm like, there's no one for like miles and miles around who'd be able to buy this. So who are you selling it to get the cash? Which, like, I guess you just like sell it to merchants far away. But like, given like the lack of transport or just the range of it, I'm like, it always boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Because like, it doesn't like ruin my immersion or whatever, but it's always like, yeah, we just sold it. And I'm like, you need a buyer to sell things. This isn't a video game where it's like, okay, selling it back to the shop for half price.
I'm sure. I think there was a little note, but I am sure that she like sells a bunch of shit to Regal himself. Because I think there was a note in there that like it was her selling his own things back to him or something like that.
Got you.
Regal's so stupid.
Yeah. The last thing that
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I was gonna talk about my last note, but that's it.
I was just saying that was my last note.
Oh, good. Okay. My last note is just a cute little one that I thought was really sweet, and it was Night Eyes. He said, "I do not think that sleeping inside is good for you," and I was just like, I'm so concerned for Fitz, and I think that it's the cutest thing in the world. Like, I just love how he like kind of takes care of Fitz sometimes. I think it's so sweet.
That reminds me, like from this chapter when like Fitz is like super scared and hiding in the bushes, like Night Eyes like slowly coaxing him out like
Yeah.
patiently. That was
And-
super cute. Yeah.
And that's when he calls him little brother, and I'm not sure if that's the first time that it happens. I know it's the first time in this book, but I think it might be the first time it happens completely.
I think you might be
think so,
right,
yeah.
but I don't remember definitively
Because I
enough.
think like now Night Eyes is like, at least in wolf years, outaged Fitz.
Yeah. And it's so sweet. And that like Night Eyes is the only one who I think Night Eyes is the only one who would be able to convince Fitz to come out and that it was safe.
Mhm.
And like it even took him a long time. Like the poor Fitz was terrified.
Mhm.
Yeah, these first few chapters are all just like, you want to see me traumatize a child? You want to see me do it again? Just like on repeat.
What could I can do?
Mhm.
I'm sorry if you
Yeah, I
guys
love how,
can
like,
hear
Night
that. My
Eyes,
dog
like-
is drinking water like right next to me.
Aw.
He's so
Thirsty.
loud.
But yeah, like, I think it's even cuter that like Night Eyes does it, because like Night Eyes is just like, I don't understand these human emotions and like dwelling on the past you speak of, but I will try to for your sake.
Yeah. He's so
This is
good.
back. Okay, are there any other notes for this chapter?
Nope.
Okay, and so our last chapter for this episode is chapter 5, Confrontations. So, Fitz continues or like starts traveling with the minstrel group, um, and they get attacked by forged ones. Um, and in order to save Night Eyes, Fitz has to abandon the group for a moment and tackle a different forged one. But in the interim, uh, one of the forged ones breaks Piper's arm and I think destroys their harp. And so Honey really goes in on him for doing what she thinks is abandoning them. Um, and then Fitz kind of like gets angry and is just like, "Fine, okay, I can't travel with other people. Never mind." The and yeah, it's sort of interesting because I feel like when I was when I did my first read of the book, I was like, yeah. In hindsight, I'm wondering why are these chapters important, and now I'm like, lots of it is like Fitz like stepping in and stepping back and constantly having this push and pull relationship with humanity and like try and like being around other people.
Yeah.
I don't like this part because the people that he's with annoy me so much. But, like, I know they're supposed to be annoying because it's like Fitz is torn between the duty he feels to these people, even though they, like, Harper, Josh, and Piper are, like, fine, but Honey's just, like, badgering him constantly, and it's so irritating. But he still feels like a duty to protect them from the sense of duty that was imbued in him in his former life.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so bad for them because like we kind of see them, they're like down on their luck, and this poor old man is blind, and he's the only man in his little group, and he still feels a responsibility to take care of his daughters, but
Right.
he physically can't. Like during the fight scene with the forged ones, like he
Do
is just
anything.
he's just standing there because he's worried that if he strikes out, he's going to hit one of his daughters. Like, he's got a 50-50 chance of hitting his kid or hitting a forged one. And, like, he doesn't know where they're coming from or any of that. Like, I just felt so bad for him. And, like, he tries so hard to get Fitz to stay with him. And I just, like, it made me so sad. Like, I hope that he found someone else who could, like, help take care of his little family and group, and, like, another, like, singing minstrel or a man or something that could, like, take over. Because I felt so bad for him.
I don't remember, where are they going? Like, why are they traveling? Why don't they just pick a town and stay there?
I think they're traveling just to find, because like they don't like. I think that's just like a minstrel thing. Like they be traveling around.
Well, also, I don't think that, like, any keeps have the space or, like, money or provisions to take care of them, so they have to be traveling. Like, they can't just settle down like how Mello did in the last books, because nobody's got enough
The
money.
funds, yeah.
Or, yeah, they've got the room, I'm sure, but I don't think they have, like, the
I mean,
extra.
they didn't even have a room. They had to sleep in the barn or stable or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if they went to Buckkeep or, like, a bigger keep in,
Fair.
like,
Right.
one of the duchies, I just don't think that, like, I think everybody's down on their luck, so they kind of have to go.
Yeah, I think like the point of these chapters is just to show like this is what's happening to the
Bad.
people of Buckkeep, and
Right.
not Buckkeep, the people of like the six duchies on like a daily basis, and this is just like one example or a microcosm.
Well, this is also when the first time that Fitz like skill walks
Yeah.
in his dream, and he is like in the body of this kid, Chad, and then you see him like, I don't know, there was like a little Easter egg I thought here when one of the raiders kills the boy. He says there's not enough life behind him to be worth the master's time. And it's like, you know that that's not enough like memories to
Forging.
make a dragon. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like the pale woman's trying to make a dragon. She doesn't want like some kid that doesn't have a lot of life to forge.
Yeah, that's such a good like catch, because usually I feel I like when I was reading over this, I was just like, okay, that's just generic line of like kid not good enough kind of thing. But then here, like, yeah, it's, now that you mention it, it's super pointed. That's such a good catch.
It's kind of wild to think, like, how many people the Pale Woman has forged to try and make a dragon, and the fact that it took 2 people, like Verity and Kettle, to, like, fully make a dragon, and how different it is, and how, like, she, like, needs so much more because she kind of sucks.
Right. She's not doing it right. It needs to have like a purpose, and it needs someone to like willingly give like their essence to it.
Yeah.
When she finally succeeds in Tawny Man, it's because Keeble Rawbread is like gone into it.
Yeah, and it's like Verity and Kettle being able to do it with 2 people, I think is definitely an outlier still.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially Kettle is like 200. You can fit so much life into this one little body, but
even like with the regular coteries, it's like, I think what, like,
it's like
5 to 7 people. So like that's a very small amount compared to like all the people that
I see typing like the fact that his name is Chad always throws me off. Yeah.
Yes. I hate that little boy's name is Chad. It like takes me out of the story every time.
Yes, because it's such a mundane, like, regular people name, and I associate, like, I think there's like the memes and stuff where Chads are like the frat boys Karen. They're like,
my sister was a frat boy for Halloween. Her and her friends were all frat boys for Halloween a couple years ago, and her like frat boy name was Chad.
Because that's such a fratty name. Like, it's
right.
so
It really is.
Can you imagine being like born in the in-between period where like the name is like just starting to take on like some sort of like popular culture connotation, but hasn't really caught on, and then you have to grow up. Like, can you imagine like
Having
like you
named
mentioned like Karen, people like just poor kids named Karen right now having to grow up.
Yeah. So sad.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe it was a good thing that Chad died. Didn't have to grow up a life of bullying.
He didn't grow into a Chad. I feel so bad for Verity.
I know, me too.
Because even when he's away on his mission to try and save everyone, he's still being pulled back to the Six Duchies to take care of them. And like he still uses his skill to protect them. And nobody is wiser. Like everyone is none the wiser because they all still think that he's dead and that he abandoned them on this like fool's errand to go find like fake elderlings who aren't even there. And he's like trying to carve his dragon, and he's still saving the Six Duchies. Like,
yeah, it's thankless.
It's no wonder that like I think the Farseers like Verity, Fitz all have like an affinity for dogs, because they may be dumb as a pile of bricks, but if there's one quality they have in spades, it's loyalty.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
One thing oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, one thing that stood out to me was Will uses like a dragon metaphor, which I thought was interesting because it's the first dragon metaphor that like I've picked up on in this trilogy, and it happens in like the first book we see a dragon. Or not, I mean a stone dragon, but
still counts.
Yeah, Will says like that if he can suck the skill strength from Fitz, then it will give him wings and claws. And I was like, interesting, because I'm pretty sure a stone dragon's gonna bite your leg off at that end of this book. So.
Sucker.
Yeah. At this point, he's read up all the skill scrolls. He's like, I'm gonna do it. It's gonna be so great. And then meanwhile, Verity is just like, no, sorry, too late.
Mm-hmm. I really liked that. I think we've got to keep an eye on for Dragon Watch now too.
Mm-hmm.
We've got
Wolf Watch,
Dragon Watch, and we had one more that we
Celerity
created.
Watch.
Yes, I forgot about Celerity Watch. My favorite one.
How could you forget?
Darn.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, one thing. There's a line here that I never picked up on before, but I was like, big foreshadowing vibes. Where like, Fitz is like, watch out for fish bones, and Night Eyes is like, my mother raised me on a salmon run. Fish bones don't bother me. And I'm like, oh, huh? Really? They will at some point in the near future. They may kill you.
Or they try to kill you, and Fitz doesn't let them kill you.
Yeah.
Oh, that also reminded me, because I think one note I had earlier, where it's like, Fitz is always like, how dare you bring me back to life? And meanwhile, Fitz is like this hypocrite. He's like, I won't let you die, Night Eyes.
Like, he's just selfish. He's like, I can't live without you, so.
Yeah, like I was talking, I'm part of like another like Realm of the Elderlings Discord server, and we're talking about like, and it just comes down to like, all of Fitz's flaws just come down to him being like unreasonably selfish. And it's hard to blame him for it, because he's never given like space to like have his own wants. But when he does, so that when he does get it, he just like tries to go all in on it. But then he also doesn't like know what he wants really. So he ends up not even when it ends up hurting others, he just sort of like, he also hurts himself, because he's like, oh, I guess I got this thing that I thought I wanted, but it's not actually what I wanted.
Well, like talking back about Night Eyes, I think that Night Eyes feels the same way that Fitz does about like it's a mutual feeling, I think, because in this section, Fitz is like thinking about how like even if he dies, in his quest to kill Regal, like at least that's like something that he got to do or like attempted to do, and he like could die happy. And then Night Eye's interjection is like, well, have you ever thought like what would happen to me if you died?
Right.
So I think that, and like, I mean, he brought Fitz into his own body and shared a body with Fitz to keep him alive. So like, it's definitely like two-sided. It's not like Night Eyes doesn't care what happens to Fitz. They both have that.
Yeah, no.
very strong connection, very strong like fear of living without one another.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's like at the time of Tawny Man, Night Eyes has like matured and grown up, and Fitz has sort of
Stick.
stagnated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like while Night Eyes is ready to learn to let go, Fitz still can't.
Well, and it's always easy being the one that's gonna leave, or easier,
Yeah.
Like, let me go, because it's like he's gonna be at peace, whereas Fitz is the one that's left, like, heartbroken and not whole.
Yeah. Death always hurts the people who are alive.
Still alive,
Yeah.
right?
Not the person who's actually died.
Yeah, and it's like it's not like the fishbone was like a nice, clean, easy passing with good catharsis.
Yeah.
So
I remember panicking when that happened on my first read. I was like, no, I'm not ready. No.
and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, cool, he survived at the end of the book.
Oh, God.
Fuck.
Right.
That's
And then
Hobb's
when it
favorite
does
thing,
happen,
the
you
double
don't
dog
even
death.
realize. Yeah. Like, just kidding. Psych. It is going to happen, though.
It was a little warning, like, this is how I could have done it, but I didn't. So be grateful.
Aren't I so nice? Meanwhile, sharpening the knife in the background.
Look, I saved Night Eyes for you.
Mm-hmm. Another note I had, I guess, when talking to Harper Josh and like Fitz is like, sorry, I'm leaving you next town. Uh, Fitz says something in his tone made me feel like I had been rude, but there were no words I wish to call back. And I feel like this is something like he repeats throughout here, where he's talking with Shade, and he's like, I said some bullshit. I said some really like angry stuff, but I'm not sure that I want to like take them back because they're true.
Yeah.
He does want to take back the stuff he says to Burrich, but then I think in general, Fitz is like he's sort of in his phase where he's like he needs to be a little more empathetic. He's just like not, yeah.
But I think that he probably feels better because he spent the whole last book just lying to everyone that he cares about. And now it must be like such a weight off his chest because he's just honest all the time. Like he doesn't, aside from like lying about his identity, which he has to stay alive, but like he just says what he is feeling, what he's thinking, instead of always having to filter it for other people.
That's definitely the problem with Fitz. He's just like he's always operating in extremes. He can't like either he's completely denying something or he accepts it too hard, and he just like yeah. Yeah, I wonder why the Forge ones like held on to the money. Like maybe it's just like I know I used to value this, so I'll hold on to it, or just like
I think they still have enough like sense of thought to know that that can lead to a thing they need or a thing they want.
I just thought that it was like they had the coins in their pockets when they became forged and then just like never even thought about them after. So it was just in the pants that they were wearing. Like, because I don't think that they take anything. They don't loot the coins that Fitz has or like any of that stuff when it's in his cabin. Like they don't take the pin or like try and take the earring off of Fitz. It's just like the things that will get them their needs right then. So it's like food, water, like a knife to kill someone with or weapon. But I think the coins, like, they didn't give any second thought to having little tinkling things in their pockets.
And can you imagine like if they managed to like successfully like half forge people, like the way that like Fitz is forged with Girl and a Dragon? And so you could like have forge ones who would still be intelligent enough to infiltrate society and be like, yes, I am here to buy stuff with my money.
No, that would be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that when the Forge one like sliced or cut Night Eyes and then like picked him. It made Fitz think of Smithy right away, because I feel like in a lot of like longer stories or series, what happens in like the first book kind of gets forgotten by later on.
Yeah.
But he's like
It's like,
immediately
no.
triggered.
We will carry trauma for your entire life, all 12 books.
Right.
Scars and trauma, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did like that. I mean, I didn't like, obviously, Night Eyes getting stabbed or sliced or whatever, but the, like, little reference back to Smithy was nice. Because that was, like, a feeling that Fitz had known before, and he's like, oh, no!
Right, he panics right away.
It snaps him out of, like, just being on the defensive, and it's like, I need to fight and protect my person. Like, I need to save my wolf. I can't let this happen again.
It's almost like the exact same thing that he does when like Smithy dies, where he just like there. I think he like knocks off the jaw. Here he like goes for the throat or something. But like it's very similar. Like okay, no more messing around.
It gives him the resolve to like
continue. Almost like the recklessness. Yeah.
Fitz needs like rage, and then once he has it, he's like unstoppable in terms of fighting. So it gives him, he like loses that rage because he's so terrified, and it gives him that sense back of like, I need to get angry and protect like my wolf.
It's once again just like extremes. He's either cares way too much about not getting hurt to the point where he like is too passive, or he's berserker rage where he's like, I will step in here, take the club to the shoulder just so I can kill you.
Yeah.
Right.
And the switch in his tactic is so quick.
Yeah.
Like we can really see how much he's progressed as a fighter just based on that. Like the switch was so crazy.
Mm-hmm. And it's super cool to see like how he's good with like he's like, oh, I don't have like the muscular mass anymore, but like he still has like the training and the drills.
Yeah, he's got the muscle memory for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Although he doesn't have the muscle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Fitz, you're no longer buff.
I think my last note for this chapter is Fitz saying, I wondered if there is any way to live amongst other people and refuse to be harnessed by their expectations and dependencies. And it's like, no, that's part of just being a social person.
Part of being a human.
Welcome to life, Fitz.
Mm-hmm.
Life 2.0 for him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously you can like grapple with it and like choose the people you spend time with, so and like control it that way. But Fitz is just like, again, feast or famine. It's like no people, all people.
Mm-hmm.
So did you guys have any other notes for this chapter?
I do. Nope.
Okay. In that case, thanks everyone for listening and or watching. I'm pretty excited for the rest of this book, but like it's definitely going to be a slow roll. So next week we're going to be doing chapters 6 through 10 of Assassin's Quest. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. Thanks for watching, y'all. Bye.
Bye.